Hi, Carl here for Proav TV, and welcome to this new series going a little bit more in depth on Kinefinity's range of affordable modular cinema cameras. Now, those of you that have been following this channel for a while, or just us here in general at Proav, will know that we've had a relationship with Kinefinity now for about a year. And when we first started talking to them, it was mainly in regards to this camera here, the Terra 4K. Now, since then, we've had the Terra 4K, we've had the Mavo, and their new flagship full-frame cinema camera, the Mavo LF. And so now that the entire lineup is here, we thought it was about time that we sat down with you all on this channel and went a little bit more in depth on each of these cameras and the system as a whole. So I'm going to look at each camera individually in more detail in upcoming episodes. But for this one, I wanted to just concentrate on the system as a whole and some of the benefits of having a modular system like this and some of the decisions that you might have to make as a Kinefinity customer. Because the major selling point of a modular system like this is that it can work for all sorts of different users at different levels, and for whatever requirements that you may have as a particular customer, you can normally make a modular system like this work for you. So let's look at the actual camera bodies themselves first. And the first thing that jumps straight out is that these are identical sizes and weights, and even things like the mounting points on the top and the bottom, and even the power draw, everything's exactly the same on their entry-level Terra 4K and on their full flagship large format cameras, the Mavo LF. And that is really impressive. And it makes your life as a customer so much easier if you want to have A cameras and B cameras, if you've got the Terra 4K and you want to upgrade to one of the other cameras, or even if you just want to have various different accessories for one camera. Having that modular system where everything is exactly the same size and interchangeable makes your life as a customer just so much easier and more transparent. I absolutely love that Kinefinity were able to get a small affordable cinema camera and their flagship full frame large format cinema camera in exactly the same size and weight and power draw. It's really impressive. So on the front of the camera bodies, you've got Kinefinity's own lens mount system. This is called the Kinney mount, and it's not used for attaching different lenses. What it's used for is attaching one of their different lens mount adapters that I will talk you through in a second. You shouldn't really think about these as adapters though. It's more useful to think of these as interchangeable lens mounts, so that you can easily swap between the different mounts that you might want to use for each job without having to take apart the camera, and it's just as easy as swapping a lens. The ports down the side here, you've got a video port at the top, you've got one of these on the Terra 4K and two of these on the Mavo LF or the Mavo. Now this is for connecting Kinefinity's monitoring accessories. So they've got the Kinney Mon, which is their just simple on-camera monitor, or in the future they'll hopefully be bringing out a EVF or a viewfinder, something like that. Hopefully that's the direction that Kinefinity are going to be going, because that means that you can use the multiple ports on the Mavos to have both a monitor and say a viewfinder attached at the same time. Underneath that, we've got a 3.5mm mic jack for connecting something like a Rode Video Mic Pro or something like that, some sort of a small microphone that you want to feed straight into the camera body. Underneath that, you've got a monaural microphone for just simple scratch audio. Say you're on a gimbal, you need some reference sounds, something like that. You can just record sound straight into the body. And then you've got a control port at the bottom for connecting to accessories. On the side, you've got all the main controls, which will go more in detail on a different episode. Underneath that, you've got the record button, and then the media button and the power button there. This is the SSD drive slot, and again, we'll go into more detail on that in a second. And a USB port. This is for updating the firmware, things like that. That's not something that you use day to day, but it's for updating the firmware, and actually it does send power out, so you can power some accessories through it as well, which is a nice little touch. On the back, we've got a Wi-Fi connection. You get an antenna included with the camera, and that's used to connect into their iPad app. You've got HDMI port for connecting to external monitors. You've got a little headphone socket down the bottom for your headphones for monitoring audio. And then you've got the Kineback extension port, which is very, very important. It connects this modular accessory here, which we'll talk about in more detail in a minute. And the same for this port here on the side. This is the side grip extension port, which connects their side grip accessory here. Underneath that, you've got a DC in port. This is obviously for your mains power, but you can also use this for powering off of other accessories like V-lock batteries, anything like that, maybe even powering from a gimbal. There's so many different ways that you can power these cameras. So I mentioned earlier that you could put different lens mount systems on the cameras. Now this is a huge plus point for Kinefinity because they give you so many different options, and it means that you can really easily swap between the different styles of glass that you want to use. But essentially the decision boils down to, do you want EF, do you want PL, or do you want Sony's E-mount? And then within each of those options and systems, there are different choices to be made as well. For example, you can have a simple adapter like this EF electronic adapter here. This purely goes between the lens and the camera and means that you can pass electronic communication between them. Then we've got the Kinney Enhancer version. This is a focal reducer, a bit like the speed booster from Metabones if you're familiar with those products. And what this means is that you can use a lens which is designed for a larger format than the sensor size that you're using, and this will shrink the image down for that sensor size, meaning that you get a wider shot, you get more light being let onto your sensor, and you get a sharper image. So if you're using the Terra 4K or actually the Mavo as well, you can use full frame lenses and get a wider, sharper and brighter image on either of these systems. Really get the most out of that full frame glass. Of course, if you're using the Mavo LF, you've got a full frame sensor, so you can't use something like this because it will give you vignetting. You're perfectly matched for those full frame lenses anyway, and there's no need for one of these. But if you're looking at the Terra 4K or even the Mavo, this should definitely be something on your list. The third option is a version with an electronic ND built in, like this EF adapter here. Now this isn't a traditional filter wheel style of ND like you see on most cameras. Instead, this is an electronic screen, a bit like the way that Sony do it inside some of their cameras, where you can actually darken the screen with an electronic signal from the camera. And what that means is that we can get fine control over the amount of ND being applied to our image with the controls on the camera. The disadvantage of this is that this can't swing out of the way to give you a completely clear image. So you're always going to be stuck with a minimal amount of ND applied. And for some users that might not be an issue, but if you need to get completely clear, I suggest that you get a separate adapter as well and put this lens mount adapter on when you're outside and this one on when you're inside. It's as simple as that. So those are the EF options. Then you've got PL as well, like the one on the camera here. You've got the normal or the variable ND version. And then in Sony's E-mount, it works slightly differently. As you can see, this is a very, very small little adapter, and there's no room in here for electronics. So this is a manual only E-mount adapter. So for this, you're not going to be able to use the vast majority of E-mount lenses because they need electronic communication. But if you've got manual only lenses, something like the SLR Magic range or Fujinon's MK Cine Zooms, they're a really nice pairing, particularly with the Super 35 Mavo. This little adapter is going to be the best option for you because it's absolutely tiny. It feels like part of the camera when it's put on the front, and it means that you can use E-mount lenses, which really is only possible on this or on Sony's own cameras. So that's a really nice option. The main benefit of all of this is that you've got choices as a user. You can have one of these cameras as an owner operator with your collection of EF glass and mainly, for example, be using a Kinney Enhancer for the majority of your work. But then say you've got a big shoot coming up with a bit more budget behind it and you want to rent some nice cinema glass, for example. You can then swap to the PL mount adapter and use whatever glass you want. It gives you some real flexible options, but the key bit is how easy it is to change these adapters. It is just like changing a lens. It's so quick and so simple. You could be using different types of glass on the same shoot and just swapping between them in a matter of minutes. So in addition to those lens mounts that we've talked about, the two main expansion modules that Kinefinity have given us for these systems is the side grip and the Kineback. Let's look first at the side grip. This is effectively a handle for the camera that gives you a few extra functions. Its main function, of course, is to give you something to hold on to with the camera, but you also get complete control of the camera from these buttons here on the top. And this is a much nicer place, in my opinion, for the controls. I've got easy and quick access to everything here with my thumb. Whether I'm handheld or whether I'm on a tripod, I really like using these controls, and I find myself reaching for these more often than I do the ones on the side of the cameras. You've also got a record button on the top and a battery slot in the bottom, because this is the small, lightweight way of powering the camera via batteries. This is a battery that's based off the Sony BPU style ones, so you will find that Sony batteries do fit into this slot. However, we strongly recommend that you use Kinefinity's own grip bats, like this one I'm holding here, just because this provides exactly the right power for the camera, and we have had some issues with other brands. So I really do recommend you use the Kinefinity ones. But essentially, this is a simple grip battery that is going to give you full power of the camera in this tiny little configuration here. So if being small and easy and lightweight is of high importance to you, I really recommend having a side grip and a few of these grip batteries. Moving on, let's look at the Kineback W. So you can think of this as an expansion box for the camera. This is the Kineback W, effectively that full-blown expansion port. And then they've got a slimmed down version of this that is just for power. It's called the Kineback Lite, and this is just the V-lock expansion port on the back and one D-tap out port. But this full-blown one, the Kineback W, gives you a whole load more than that. On the back, of course, is this V-lock connection, and this is the way to power the camera for hours and hours and hours using professional V-lock batteries. This is Kinefinity's own Kinebacks here, and as you can see, this fits the dimensions of the Kineback and the cameras absolutely perfectly, and is just going to sit really nicely and flush with the camera. But there's all sorts of third-party options that you can use here. On the back here of the Mavo, I've got one of the larger SWIT batteries, which, as you can see, doesn't fit exactly flush, but in a full rigged out version like this, really you don't notice it too much. And that is a much, much higher capacity. And then they do much smaller ones as well, which are brilliant with it. But you can use V-locks from any third-party company. It's the nice thing about things being so open source. So that's the power. You get two D-tap out ports there so that you can power your accessories on the top of your camera. On the top, you get two XLRs, and the Kineback does have its own preamps in it as well. So you do get better sound quality when recording through those two XLR ports than you do straight into the camera body through, say, the 3.5mm jack on the side. You get better quality preamps in the Kineback. You get two SDI ports here on the side for monitoring. You get a sync port, an extension port, and a timecode in and out port. Then on the top, there's this red slot. Now this is for Movcam's Dark Tower technology, which I haven't actually had a chance to take a look at yet because it is so new. But essentially the idea behind this is that it's a wireless card that slots down into the top of the Kineback, and is then going to give you full wireless control of your entire camera system. You're going to be able to see a wireless monitor of the image. You're going to be able to control all the camera settings. You're even going to be able to feed information out to a lens control system through the extension ports on the cameras and control everything remotely from a wireless system. Brilliant for gimbal use, brilliant for using these cameras up a crane, even for using handheld where the operator just wants to focus on the framing. I'm really looking forward to having a play with that system. So overall, you can think of the Kineback as being the complete professional in and out extension box for these cameras. The same one fits on every single camera from the lineup, and as you can see, it really doesn't add too much to the size and bulk of the camera, while adding a huge amount of flexibility. So you can choose to run like this if you want all the professional in and out ports, or you can choose to run like this with maybe just with a side grip there if you want to keep it as small and lightweight as possible. And of course you can use both at the same time for that added control and the extension, and you can power it off of both the grip batteries and the V-locks, and even hot swap between them so you never have to power the camera down. So the nice thing about all the camera bodies being exactly the same dimensions with the same mounting ports is that rigging companies only need to come up with one solution for the entire range. And Kinefinity have a great relationship with Movcam, another Chinese company, which is why a lot of the bundles that you'll see on our website for these cameras come with the Movcam accessories. And that's what I'm using here for this Mavo rig. I've got their base plate, I've got their top plate, and this top handle here, as well as their monitor mount for this small HD monitor here, which normally people would use with the Kinney Mon itself. And these work absolutely fine, but hopefully over the next few years, we're going to see more and more different options for a bit more choice from other manufacturers as well. But for now, these Movcam ones are a great solution. And the last thing I really wanted to talk you through was the media, because these cameras use off-the-shelf 7mm drives. They're simple SSD drives, and they're easy to get a hold of. And so you might already have these if you're used to using them with external recorders or anything like that. But they are just off-the-shelf 7mm thickness SSDs. There's no fancy proprietary media that is going to cost you an arm and a leg here. Kinefinity do, however, make their own ones, which, although I say you can use any SSD drives here, what I really mean is that any SSD will fit. Because there are so many different types of SSD media, all at different speeds, all at different formats, the only ones that we can really guarantee are going to work perfectly fine are the Kinefinity options, the Kinney Mags, these ones here. You've got a 500GB one or the 1TB option. Now, of course, there are benefits to using the Kinefinity ones. They've got this nice groove on them so that you can easily pull them in and out of the camera. They're very reliable drives and they're very well built. But realistically, people are going to want to use different drives from different manufacturers. Now, you are going to have to be careful and choose ones that are fast enough for each different record format and the camera that you want. And we will have some choice accessory ones on our product page for these cameras under the accessories tab. So make sure you go there to see which ones we're recommending with it. But for the best out of these cameras, we do recommend you use Kinefinity's own drives. So hopefully this video has given you a bit of an idea as to how flexible this system is. If it's a bit intimidating, all these different parts, please don't worry. Once you actually start piecing it together, it can be incredibly simple. And if you want help, please do just give us a call and any of our sales team here can help you guide you through the system. But at its heart, you need to choose your own camera body, you need to choose what in and out ports you need, and you need to choose which lens mount to put on the front. And that is it in terms of decisions. The rest of it all just falls into place very, very nicely. Now, if you have any questions at all, please do leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Please do keep an eye on this channel because over the next coming weeks, we're going to be releasing more and more videos in this series where we look more in depth at different areas of the cameras and at each camera in particular, looking at their strengths and weaknesses, comparing them to each other and helping you decide which one of these lineup is right for you. If you want to buy one, just get in touch with our sales team or head over to our website. Thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one.